So when I was a student at San Francisco State, back in the Stone Age, I listened to KSAN radio, and there was this guy, Scoop Nisker. Anybody remember? Okay, so we had this tagline at the end of every report, and Scoop would say, if you don't like the news, go out and make some of your own. And that was the whole morning discussion reminded me of that. Here we are, we don't like the news, so we're going to do something about it. And it was kind of like that with this project. Here we go. So I'm here to talk about Circle Way. This is the book that I finished after my wife died. And on one level, it's a simple memoir by a, oh wow, look at that. It's a simple memoir by syndicated feature writer Mary Ann Hogan about her father, longtime San Francisco Chronicle literary editor William Hogan. On another level, it isn't simple. For 30 years, Bill was a book editor. He interviewed famed authors, new authors, wrote a daily column, millions of words. Publishers wanted to print a book by Bill, but he never wrote it. He painted instead. He painted in notebooks. And all the illustrations in Circle Way, all the ones you see here are Bill Hogan's. Bill suffered a lot of anxiety, and he called it flying thoughts. This is a picture of his painting of his flying thoughts. In his first notebook entry, he wrote, "I have never kept a journal." Why? Maybe because the thoughts are not very good or important. But his writing was good. In newsrooms, people who say they're good writers usually aren't. The people who say they're not good writers probably are. Mary Ann was her father's daughter. She was a self-made journalist, a lover of books and wine. My father, she wrote, was emotionally crippled by his once famed anti-intellectual Catholic California family, a family that fell to pieces under the tyranny of its own prosperity. This is the patriarch of the family was a lumber baron in Oakland, built much of San Francisco and Oakland, but lost it all because he got greedy in the run-up to 1929. So she took on this story, and then she got stuck and started worrying that there was some kind of paralysis rolling down the generations to her. You know, can I do this, she asked. To what degree does family mean destiny? Now, Bill saw himself as an everyman. He loved ships and imagined exotic voyages. He told stories about Steinbeck, Baldwin, Didion, about his grandfather, the lumber baron, about how you become a self-taught literary editor. Mary Ann raised a family, wrote and taught journalists in Virginia and Florida, and then she got unstuck. She went back to school. She got her MFA. She pieced together his story and found within it her own. She rewrote it all into a lyric essay. Very nearly finished the book. Reading her father's journals feels like prying open a shell to find the unpolished gem inside, an accident of beauty. We returned to Marin for the final chapter, which was about coming home. I loved how she used to describe the fog as dollops of whipped cream spilling out of the fog machine. Then her cancer came back. Chemo was hard, and we started re-editing this manuscript. And one day she just looked at me and she said, nothing. After 40 years, you really don't need to say much. Not a word. And I just held the manuscript to my chest and said, yeah. And she knew I would finish it. On February 14th, 2019, she left me a card said, will you be my Valentine one more day, one more time, and forever? And 3 years later, on the day after Valentine's Day, we published her book. It took 3 years because, number one, it's a book. Number two, we did it the way she wanted us to. And number three, grief takes time. I was essentially her literary executor. If you write and you don't have one, get one. I read everything she hadn't published, every page of Bill's journals, the letters from famous writers that he just tossed into a drawer. Lucky for us, the book was well received. We had to do an awful lot of our own publicity. I was struck by how Bay Area newspapers had changed. We had gone from dozens of dailies with Sunday magazines, book sections, to whatever it is you call what we have now. Most of our local news today comes from the Bay Area News Group, which is, and let's be frank, it's owned by a hedge fund that sucks money out of communities, and even worse, doesn't leave them with the basic news and information that encourages democratic participation. But there's one good thing. Nonprofit news sites are growing. Publishing was like that too. It had changed. There was a lot of commercialism. You know, a lot of the commercial publishers told us, this book is too literary. The book is too literary. So at the end of the day, we used a hybrid publisher and did a lot of the work ourselves. But I used to think, and I've said here before, that a good grant is an effort to change the future. So why not a good book? You know, Mary Ann used to say that it's all about shelf life, you know, to be able to write in a way that echoes into infinity. So I hope daughters and writers everywhere will be changed by this book. But I also thought, what if we donated the proceeds of the book to the Hogan Newton Fund for Young Journalists? So my donor-advised fund at the Miami Foundation. And that way we get two shots at changing the future, the book and the grants. And so far we've granted $30,000, most of it to turbocharge the internships at the Bay City News Foundation, CAT. I like Bay City because it's a connector. It links the for-profit and nonprofit newsrooms. Its potential reach is the sum of all Bay Area newsrooms. These are the journalists Mary Ann spent her life teaching. And now, in a way, she still helps them. And one of the very first interns ended up, of all places, at the San Francisco Chronicle. And Bill Hogan would have looked at it, his jaw dropping, and just said, imagine that. Thank you.